Hi, my name's Austin Dorrity. I feel very privileged to have been asked by St Anne's Hospice to deliver a brief presentation contributing to their recognition of their 50-year anniversary. This presentation will explore communication challenges we may come across when working with people who have a learning disability or those who fit under the umbrella of neurodiversity. Identifying good practice will help people to consider their approaches, reflecting on and developing our communication skills benefits everyone that we work with. And it also promotes respectful and equitable care for all. Effective communication starts with empathy. Unfortunately, there can often be some difficulties in establishing the connections with people which make empathy possible. We make connection with people by finding similarities and things we have in common, our perceptions and how we understand and relate to the world around us. There are many learning disabled people who are also neurodiverse. Identification and diagnosis of autism in people with learning disability often does not happen, and diagnostic overshadowing attributes presentations and differences to the learning disability and not to other potential neurological differences. Also, people with a learning disability can often face cognitive challenges which can further hinder effective two-way communication. So neurodiversity, because of differences in thinking styles and making connections with the people, sharing perspectives and things like that, can result in communication challenges. There was a recent experiment carried out by Edinburgh University, which saw 3 lines of people. One line of people were neurotypical. One line of people all had a diagnosis of autism, and the third line was a mixture of neurotypical people and people with a diagnosis of autism. And a message was given to the people at the front of each line, and they had to pass the message down the line to the person at the end. The line of neurotypical people managed to pass the message to the back of the line successfully, as did the line of people who had a diagnosis of autism. But the mixed group struggled, and the message altered significantly by the time it got to the end of the line. What this demonstrated was that there are communication challenges between neurotypical people and those who are on the autistic, who are autistic and neurodiverse. A chap called Damien Milton identifies that there is this double empathy problem. So simply put, Damien recognises that the theory of double empathy problem suggests that when people with very different experiences of the world interact with one another, they will struggle to empathise with each other. This is likely to be exacerbated through differences in language use and comprehension. Some of these differences, one of which being theory of mind, can include differences in sharing information over, under, or without context, the expectations of the other person's knowledge, difficulty in predicting others' behaviour, and focusing more on one's own interest, and ambivalence towards others' point of view. Just to kind of demonstrate the problem here with theory of mind is this quote here is, "I absolutely understand that people have their own plans, thoughts and points of view, but those plans, thoughts and points of view are often a mystery to me." Can you see here, just by that different way of thinking, the challenges with theory of mind and how that can actually prevent us from developing a connection with someone, and therefore problems with establishing empathy? Okay. Another difference which can cause challenges is central coherence, and we know that lots of people who are neurodiverse may struggle with central coherence, and Some of the differences we see are the attention to detail, over-focusing on specific words, being challenged by changes in a familiar environment, or understanding the bigger picture. Yeah, focusing on the detail, not seeing the whole context of stuff. Okay. There's many different communication styles that we may come across, and certainly autistic people who are neurodiverse, when they often experience difficulties with communicating and interacting with others, they can experience difficulties with understanding language, making sense of what people say, using words and sentences to communicate. They can have difficulties understanding the non-verbal rules of good communication, such as reading social cues and knowing when to speak or to listen. The speech of autistic and neurodiverse people can vary from just a few words through to highly accomplished language skills. Some people, you might find, they repeat words or phrases, and we call that echolalia. Other forms of communication may include vocalization, signs, symbols, and gestures. One thing that's important to consider is the motivation to communicate. And that can often be linked with the theory of mind that we looked at before. There are different reasons why a person is motivated to communicate. And people on the autism spectrum or who are neurodiverse might not share the same motivation to communicate as other people might. For example, non-autistic people often engage in small talk to fill in time. Autistic people might not be so motivated to engage in this type of communication. Another example there of difference and being able to make that connection. You've got someone who is neurotypical, who speaks in a very way, filling up the gaps in the conversation using the small talk, and that doesn't connect with how the neurodiverse person communicates. Okay. Our basic communication can be very literal. We use common phrases every day. Everyday language and visual instructions are often confusing. Some examples like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'll be with you in a minute. Free cash available on a cash machine. Examples of things there where we can say things and someone could take the literal interpretation of them. Sometimes people can struggle with processing delay, and they might need extra time to process what is being said to them and to form their own response. This may impact verbal communication and the amount and variety of words and expressions available to them at the time they have to respond. Emotions are abstract concepts involving reading others' emotions, understanding a lot of verbal and non-verbal signals. Autistic people may interpret the emotions of other people differently, but emotional literacy can be difficult for non-autistic people too. At the same time, autistic people might also express their needs and emotions differently, such as not showing emotions on the face or through body language, for example. Another example, a laugh might not indicate happiness, but could actually be a sign of anxiety or discomfort. Clenched fists might be a sensory behaviour rather than an expression of frustration or hunger. It's interesting, some of the non-verbal things around the use of facial expressions. Just consider yourself when you're working with people, how do you know how they're feeling? And we use our own reference base in order to assess and judge people and how they're feeling. How do we tell when someone's in pain? Perhaps we look for someone who's grimacing, because that's what we would do. It's important to recognise that because we're different and people don't have the same use of facial expressions and body language, that we don't miss things in there as well. Eye contact, and so there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about eye contact, people who are autistic or neurodiverse. And I suppose one for me historically was, if I didn't get eye contact from people, I made this assumption they weren't interested in me. Very, very easy to do, very, very easy to attribute your own thoughts and reference bases. Okay. Some neurodiverse people may experience differences or difficulties with using speech, though that identifying and describing, naming emotions again, the literal interpretation of language, which we talked about, knowing what to say at the time, actually starting conversations, understanding that non-verbal communication and recognizing the rules for the communication situation. All these things can get in the way of effective two-way shared communication. It's interesting, if I were to say to someone, please will you go and shut that door? I haven't actually communicated it to them, I've just said it. Yeah, it's only communication when I know that they've understood, processed, interpreted what I've said and been able to communicate it back to me. In here we've also got word level, and quite often we can put too many keywords within a sentence, and it can confuse people. So this might sound really polite if I said, Dave, please will you go upstairs and get your coat? We're going to go out into town and we're going to see if there's something that we can buy you to get for your sister's birthday. Yeah, lovely, nice, polite sentence. However, that could really, really confuse Dave, and it might be far more respectful to Dave if I'd said, Dave, coat, car. He knows that he needs to go to get his coat. We're going out to get in this car. Yeah. Thinking about the word level, not in trying to over confuse people. Yeah. When we adjust our communication, we need to recognise that people will have their own preferred communication preferences. We need to get to know people. We need to find out what those are, what barriers there are to that effective communication, and what barriers we bring as well. Yeah, it's not just the person that we're working with who has the communication difference. It's our ability to connect with them and to get that empathy there as well. Our communication needs to be clear and calm. We allow time for processing. We give positive information and comments. We help provide structure and context. And sometimes we've got, from an autistic adult here saying text-based communication is preferred, so that I have time to process the information and I can refer back to it. For some people, text-based communication may not work because of their learning disability and their abilities to read. So it's about really getting to know someone and what might augment their communication best. For some people, it may be pictures, visual timetables, symbols, objects of reference, anything that we can use to enhance and augment that communication. So it is shared two-way communication. Some more tips here to take away. Talk to people directly. Think about the environment, reducing any distractions, background noise. What we do know about people with neurodiversity, that they can often struggle with sensory stimuli as well. Use everyday words that the person themselves relate to. And that can be, trying to reduce as much jargon as we possibly can. Yeah, using short sentences. Again, giving the person time to process the information and respond. Listen to the person. And this is a challenge to actually really test our listening out. Have we actually heard what they're saying? Look for non-verbal responses as well as verbal responses. Look for people's body language. Get to know and understand that person's responses and what their body language is. and encourage the person to show you as well as tell you what they think. Thank you very much for listening. Are you there?